They say beauty can be both a gift and a curse. But what happens when the pursuit of luxury leads young women down paths they never imagined they'd take? This is the story of Adanna, whose name meant father's daughter, but who forgot whose daughter she truly was. The story presents one perspective on complex social issues. If you or someone you know is in an exploitative situation, please contact local authorities, women's support organizations, or medical professionals, rather than relying solely on spiritual interpretations. If you've ever worried about the choices young women around you are making, if you've seen the pressure social media puts on people to appear successful, you need to hear this cautionary tale about what can happen when the pursuit of beauty and luxury becomes more important than wisdom and safety. Hit that subscribe button, because this story serves as both warning and reminder that some paths that look golden are actually leading somewhere much darker. My people, gather close. What I'm about to share with you is not just a story, it is a mirror, a warning wrapped in truth. In a compound where love flowed like honey and discipline stood firm like an Iroquois tree, lived a young woman, blessed beyond measure. Adanna was her name, tall as a palm tree, beautiful as the morning star rising over the Niger. But beauty, my friends, can be both a gift and a curse. And Adanna knew her power from an early age. She grew up in a home where her parents worked hard to provide for their children. Her father sold auto parts in the market. Her mother was a seamstress who stayed up late by lamplight, finishing orders for customers who needed their clothes for church on Sunday or weddings on Saturday. They were not rich, but they were not poor. There was always food on the table, always money for school fees, always enough love to fill any emptiness that might try to creep into their daughter's heart. When Adanna's university acceptance letter arrived, there was celebration that lasted 3 days. Drums of joy echoed through their compound. Neighbors came to congratulate them. The pastor announced it in church as a testimony of God's faithfulness. They had raised their daughter well, taught her the ways of respect, hard work, and faith. How were they to know that the very beauty they thanked God for would become the thing that led her astray? At 18, Adanna left for university with her parents' blessings, their prayers, and a suitcase packed with everything they could afford to give her. Simple clothes, basic necessities, and a heart full of dreams about becoming a lawyer who would help people and make her family proud. But at the university, 2 paths stretched before Adanna like rivers flowing in opposite directions. On one side walked her childhood friend, Chioma, good God, who had also been accepted to the same university. Chioma came from an even more modest background than Adanna, but she had given her heart to Christ in secondary school and held on to her faith like an anchor in stormy seas. Chioma attended prayer meetings, joined the fellowship group, studied hard, and was content with her simple lifestyle. She wore the same few outfits in rotation, ate simple meals, and found joy in small things: a good grade on an exam, an encouraging word from a friend, a beautiful sunset viewed from the dormitory window. On the other side lay the glittering world that social media had taught young women to aspire to, the world of fast money, fast cars, and faster men, the world where beauty was currency and youth was a commodity to be traded for luxury. Adanna looked at Chioma's simple clothes, her quiet joy, her prayer meetings filled with students who came from villages and compounds just like theirs. She looked at their contentment with simple pleasures, their focus on academics and spiritual growth, their acceptance of a lifestyle that prioritized character over appearance. and she chose the other river, the one that sparkled with what she thought was gold. It started innocently enough. A classmate named Blessing, though her life showed little evidence of divine blessing, invited Adanna to a party. Not just any party, but a party where important people would be present. "Adanna, you're too beautiful to be wasting your time in fellowship meetings," Blessing said. "You could be living like a queen. You just need to know the right people." At the party, Adanna saw young women her age wearing clothes that cost more than her father made in a year. They carried handbags that could pay university fees for an entire semester. They spoke casually about trips to Dubai, London, South Africa, places Adanna had only seen in movies. "How?" she asked Blessing quietly as they watched these glamorous young women. "They understand the game," Blessing replied. "Beauty is power. Youth is valuable. Why should we suffer when we can use what God gave us to live well?" That night, Adanna was introduced to men who were old enough to be her father, sometimes her grandfather. Men with expensive watches and European cars. Men who spoke about business deals and property investments. Men who looked at young women like Adanna the way a buyer examines merchandise. "You are very beautiful," one of them told her, his eyes moving over her body in a way that made her skin crawl. "With the right guidance, you could live very well." He gave her money that night, more money than she had ever held in her hands. Just for spending an evening at their table, just for smiling and laughing at their jokes, just for letting them buy her expensive drinks and take photos with her. "This is just the beginning," he promised. "There are opportunities for a girl like you." That night, Adanna lay in her dormitory bed, staring at the money. It was enough to buy her entire wardrobe twice over. It was enough to send some home to her parents. It was enough to make her feel, for the first time in her life, like she had power. The next morning, Chioma asked where she had been. "Just a small party," Adanna said casually. "Nothing special." But she didn't mention the money hidden under her mattress. She didn't mention the business card the old man had given her. She didn't mention the way his hand had lingered on her waist when they took photos, or the things he had whispered in her ear about what she could have if she was smart and cooperative. Like a moth drawn to flame, Adanna danced deeper into darkness. The parties became more frequent. The gifts became more expensive. The requests became more specific. "Come with me to Abuja for the weekend," one man said. "Just to accompany me to some business meetings." Nothing more. But there was always more. There were always expectations that weren't spoken directly but were understood. There were always compromises that started small and grew larger. Within 6 months, Adanna had a wardrobe that made her the envy of every girl on campus. She had a phone that was more expensive than some people's cars. She took trips to exotic locations and posted photos that collected hundreds of likes and comments. "Living my best life," she would write, under photos of herself in designer clothes in 5-star hotels in Dubai. Young women across the continent would stare at their phones with envy, sending her messages asking for advice on how they too could hustle like Adanna, how they too could get sponsors, how they too could escape the limitations of their modest backgrounds and live like queens. Adanna became an inspiration to girls who saw in her proof that beauty could indeed be a pathway to wealth. She never posted about the price she was paying. She never mentioned the nights she couldn't sleep because of the things she had to do to maintain her lifestyle. She never talked about the way she felt empty inside, despite being surrounded by luxury. She certainly never mentioned the strange rituals some of her sponsors insisted on. The baths with herbs she didn't recognize. the visits to native doctors who said prayers in languages she didn't understand, the jewelry she was told to wear during certain encounters. It's just for spiritual protection, they would tell her, for blessing and prosperity. But Adanna was beginning to understand that when the foundation is rotten, even the most beautiful house will fall. Chioma watched from a distance as her childhood friend transformed into someone she barely recognized. She tried to maintain their friendship, but Adanna was increasingly unavailable, traveling constantly, surrounded by a new circle of friends who spoke only of money and material things. "I'm worried about you," Chioma said, during one of their rare conversations. "Worried about what?" Adanna replied, adjusting her new gold necklace. "Look at my life, Chioma. Look at what I've achieved. While you're here praying and fasting, I'm actually living." "But at what cost?" Chioma asked gently. "Cost?" Adanna laughed. "The cost is worth it. I'm not like you, content to be poor and call it blessing. I want more from life." Then came the man who would change everything. His name was Chief Okoro, though she later learned that wasn't his real name. He was wealthy beyond imagination, with businesses spanning multiple countries and influence that reached into the highest levels of government. When Adanna met him at an exclusive party in Victoria Island, she thought she had finally made it to the top level of the game she had been playing. But Chief Okoro's eyes were like empty wells. When he looked at her, she felt like he was seeing something she couldn't see, something that made her soul shiver even while her body responded to the luxury he offered. "You are special," he told her on their first evening together. "More special than the other girls. I have plans for you." Those plans involved a level of wealth that made her previous lifestyle look modest. A house in Lekki Phase 1, a car worth more than most people would make in their entire lives. Access to circles of power and influence she had only dreamed of. But the rituals became more intense, the spiritual requirements more demanding, the things she was asked to do more degrading. Power requires sacrifice, Chief Okoro would tell her when she expressed discomfort. Beauty is a spiritual force. To harness it properly, certain ceremonies are necessary. She began to lose weight, though she was eating well. Her skin, which had always been her pride, began to lose its natural glow. She felt tired constantly, even when she slept for long hours. Strange dreams plagued her nights, dreams of being consumed, drained, used up. But the money kept coming. The lifestyle continued, and she told herself that these were just temporary side effects of stress, of traveling, of the pressure of maintaining her position in this world she had fought so hard to enter. The bleeding started on a Tuesday. At first, she thought it was normal, just her monthly cycle arriving early. But it didn't stop. Day after day, week after week, her body seemed to be leaking life itself. Her radiant skin began to dull like a lamp running out of oil. The curves that had drawn men like bees to nectar began to fade as weight dropped from her body, despite her efforts to eat. The doctors she visited, expensive private doctors in high-end clinics, ran tests that showed nothing conclusive. They gave her medicines that didn't help. They suggested treatments that made no difference. Meanwhile, Chief Okoro became distant. The calls became less frequent. The gifts stopped coming. "You don't look well," he said during their last meeting. "Perhaps you should go home and rest. Take care of yourself." But she understood what he meant. "You are no longer useful to me." One by one, they all scattered. The friends who had celebrated with her, the men who had promised her the world, the social media followers who had praised her lifestyle. Like roaches, when light suddenly floods a dark room, They all disappeared. Her Instagram posts, once filled with luxury and glamour, became fewer and less confident. The girl who had inspired thousands with her success slowly faded from public view. All except one person remained: Chioma. Good God stayed. When Adanna could no longer hide her condition, when she could no longer pretend that everything was fine, Chioma was the one who came to her dormitory room and found her collapsed on the floor. "We need to take you home," Chioma said, helping her friend to a sitting position. "We need to take you to your parents." "I can't," Adanna whispered. "How can I face them like this? How can I tell them what I've become?" "You tell them the truth," Chioma said gently, "and you let them love you anyway." The journey home was the longest trip of Adanna's life. Every kilometer brought her closer to confronting the gap between who she had pretended to be and who she had actually become. When her parents saw their daughter, once their pride, now a shadow of herself, tears became their daily bread. But they didn't ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. They simply surrounded her with love and began the process of trying to help her heal. Together with Chioma, they carried Adanna to their church, where the pastor was a man who had seen many young people destroyed by the pursuit of fast money and easy wealth. There, with what little strength remained, Adanna confessed. She told them about the parties, the men, the money. She told them about the rituals she had participated in, the spiritual transactions she never understood she was part of. The pastor listened with sadness, but without judgment. "My daughter," he said finally, "you were used in ways you didn't understand. There are people in this world who understand spiritual forces that most of us cannot see. They use the beauty and youth of people like you to renew covenants with dark powers. Your life force, your beauty, your very essence, these things were traded for wealth and power, but not for your benefit." He explained what many young women never understand, that some of the wealthy men who seek out beautiful young women are not just buying companionship or even just exploiting them for physical pleasure. Some are using them in spiritual transactions, draining their life force to maintain their own power and wealth. The rituals, the ceremonies, the strange requirements, these were not just meaningless traditions. They were designed to transfer your spiritual energy to others. Your beauty was being harvested, your youth consumed to feed something else. The church surrounded Adanna with prayer and counseling. Her parents never left her side. Chioma organized prayer chains and fasting sessions. But some seeds, once planted in cursed soil, bear fruit that cannot be stopped by prayer alone. Despite their efforts, despite the love surrounding her, despite the spiritual warfare waged on her behalf, Adanna's condition continued to deteriorate. The doctors finally identified the problem. Her immune system had collapsed completely. Her body was attacking itself. The medical term was autoimmune disease, but those who understood spiritual matters knew it was something deeper. Some damages, the pastor explained to her parents, cannot be undone by human means. We can pray, we can love, we can surround her with support, but ultimately, some consequences of spiritual manipulation are beyond our power to reverse. Adanna spent her final months at home, surrounded by the love she had once taken for granted. Her parents cared for her as they had when she was a child. Chioma visited daily, reading scripture, praying, simply being present. In those quiet moments, Adanna had time to reflect on the choices she had made and the path that had led her to this place. "I thought I was so smart," she told Chioma one afternoon as they sat together in her childhood room. "I thought I was using them, but they were using me all along." "Don't torture yourself," Chioma said gently. "You were young. You were targeted by people who knew exactly how to exploit your desires. But you were the same age, Adanna pointed out. You had the same opportunities. Why didn't you fall for it? Chioma was quiet for a long moment. I think it was because I always remembered that my worth came from being loved by God, not from being desired by men. When you know you're already valuable, you're less likely to sell yourself cheaply. Adanna's light went out like a candle in the wind on a Thursday morning in December. But her story burns on as a warning flame. At her funeral, young women from across the city came to pay their respects. Many of them had followed her on social media, had envied her lifestyle, had sent her messages asking how they could achieve what she had achieved. Now they saw the end of that story. Her parents, in their grief, made a decision. They asked Chioma to help them turn Adanna's story into a teaching tool. They began visiting secondary schools and universities, sharing their daughter's experience as a cautionary tale. We don't share this to shame our daughter's memory, her father would say. We share it to protect other people's daughters. Share this story with your daughters, your sisters, your friends. For in remembering, we honor not just Adanna's life, but we protect the lives of those who come after. The price of beauty should never be your soul. The cost of luxury should never be your life. And the pursuit of wealth should never lead you away from the people who love you most. This is Adanna's legacy, a warning that could save others from walking the same path. If this story made you think about the young women in your life, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that notification bell for more stories that matter, stories that teach, stories that protect. And remember, some paths that glitter are actually leading into darkness. Choose your route carefully. Your life and your soul depend on it.